Knowledge and the Gettier Problem. That's what we're going to delve into today in this video. So for those of you that don't know me, my name is Michael Grippers, and this channel that you have happened upon by chance is where I share my own explorations into philosophy and history and literature and just things I find interesting. So before we get into it, if you haven't already, subscribe and do all the other YouTubey things that the YouTubey people tell you to do. So, as I said, today's video is about knowledge. And knowledge is something that, well, obviously it's a central topic in philosophy, but it is something that philosophers have tried or have been trying to define and understand for centuries. And it's still an area of ongoing debate. So the goal of this video isn't to solve the problem. It is just to a relatively quick video to explore the classical definition of knowledge and some of its sort of key challenges and alternative theories that have emerged over time. One of them, or the most important key challenges to the classical definition of knowledge that we're going to get into is the Gettier Problem, which was something that was presented by a philosopher named Edmund Gettier. So the classical definition of knowledge is usually presented or described as justified true belief. And this definition, which goes back to Plato, says that for a person to know something, three conditions must be met. Belief, i.e. you must believe the proposition. Truth, i.e. the proposition must be true. And justification, you must have good reasons or evidence for your belief. So those are the three conditions which have to be met for justified true belief, for the classical definition of knowledge. So let's investigate briefly those components. So we'll start with belief. So you can't claim to know something if you don't believe it. If I say that I know that London is the capital of England, I must genuinely believe that statement. If I don't believe that London is the capital of England, I'm not going to claim that I know it. So as an example of that, imagine you're in like a quiz, like a trivia game, and what do they call them? The quizmaster, the host. That's the word I was looking for. The host asks you a question. What is the capital of Australia? Well, you believe that the capital of Australia is Sydney. You're wrong, but that's what you believe. The correct answer, if you're wondering, is Canberra. Since you believed it to be true, it was a belief, so it does satisfy the first condition that needs to be met. You do believe it. However, it wasn't true, and as a result, you don't actually know the answer. So you can't claim that that is knowledge. You can't claim that to assert that Sydney is the capital of Australia is knowledge, because it only meets one of those conditions. Specifically, in this case, belief. So the next condition that needs to be met is truth. So belief on its own, as we've just seen, is not enough. For knowledge, your belief must also be true. If you believe something that is false, no matter how strongly you believe it, it is not knowledge. So, as an example, let's say that you're a flat earther. You for some reason genuinely believe that the earth is flat. And even if you have arguments that make sense to you, your belief can't count as knowledge because it does not correspond to the facts. The fact that the Earth is in fact round. So the truth component isn't met. Therefore, you've got the belief and you have some justification for your belief because you have arguments that make sense to you. But the belief is still false, therefore it doesn't count as knowledge. Simple enough, right? So the final component that has to be looked at is justification. So your essentially your belief has to be justified. You have to be able to explain your belief. So this means that you need good reasons or evidence for holding that belief. It's not enough to guess it and get it right by luck. That doesn't count as knowledge. So as an example, if you claim to know that there's a coin in your pocket, you must have some justification. You might have some justification, rather, if you remember putting the coin there earlier in the day. However, if you say that there's a coin in your pocket but are only guessing without any reason, even if it turns out to be correct, even if it turns out you do have a coin in the pocket, in your pocket, it wasn't knowledge, it was just luck because it wasn't justified. So if you don't have that instance of remembering, as the justification in the sort of first version of that example was, remembering putting that coin there, if you don't have that, or whatever the justification may be, if you don't have that, but you just happened upon the right answer, it's still not knowledge because it's not justified. You have the belief, you believe it, and it turns out to be a true belief, it turns out to be correct, but you don't have justification, therefore it does not count as knowledge. So this definition, justified true belief, has been the standard for understanding knowledge for, well, forever really, right up until the, I'm so terrible with dates, but I think around the 60s, when Edmund Gettier showed the world that this definition of knowledge is far from being foolproof. So this challenge is what we call the Gettier Problem. So in the 60s, Edmund Gettier published a short paper that shook the foundations of this sort of traditional definition. In fact, when I say short paper, if memory serves, it was only like 2 pages long or something, so it really was a short paper. But yeah, so anyway, with this incredibly short paper, Gettier showed that you can have a true belief let me try that again. Gettier showed that you can have a belief that is true and justified, yet still not have knowledge. Now you might think, well, how is that possible? Well, a good way to get that across is going to be through an example. So I'll give you an example of a Gettier case. So imagine for a moment you have a friend, let's call this friend Sarah, and Sarah drives a red car. You see her driving the red car every day, so you have good reasons to believe that Sarah drives a red car. One day, you look out the window and see what you think is Sarah's red car in the driveway. And based on this, you conclude Sarah is home. However, what you don't know is that Sarah's red car broke down last night, and she borrowed her neighbour's identical car. So your belief that Sarah is home is justified because you can see the red car. It happens to be true, i.e. that Sarah is home, but the car in the driveway isn't hers, it's just a coincidence. So according to Gettier, even though you have a justified true belief, this situation feels a lot like luck. And we wouldn't want to say that you truly know Sarah is home. And this is called a Gettier case, and it shows that justified true belief may not be enough to fully define knowledge. And because of the Gettier problem, philosophers have proposed alternative theories of knowledge. So I'm going to list 3 or 4. We're not going to go into any great detail about them. It's something you can look into, but and I will do videos on each of them in the future. But for the time being, this will illustrate some of the sort of alternatives that have been put forward thanks to the Gettier problem. So we'll start with reliabilism. I struggled to say that word. So this theory says that knowledge isn't just about having justified true beliefs. It's about having beliefs that are formed in a reliable way. For example, our senses, sight, hearing, and so on and so forth, right, are generally reliable, as far as we know. So if we form beliefs based upon them, those beliefs are more likely to count as knowledge. As an example of this, if you see a tree outside your window and your vision is clear, we can say that your belief there is a tree outside is knowledge because it's formed by a reliable process, i.e. you saw it. Simple enough, right? The issue with reliabilism is, or one of the issues with reliabilism is that how do you know that your senses are reliable? And that challenge is a challenge put forward by by radical skepticism, which essentially says that you potentially can't really know anything about the external world. So reliabilism, it would seem, falls short of a definitive definition of knowledge. So another sort of proposed alternative to defining knowledge is what do they call it? Virtue epistemology. So this approach focuses on the qualities or the intellectual virtues of the person forming the belief. Essentially, knowledge is the result of good cognitive habits. A person who is careful, thoughtful, and logical is more likely to acquire real knowledge, true knowledge. As an example of this, imagine a scientist who follows strict research protocols, checks data carefully, and avoids bias. If this scientist concludes that a new medicine works based on careful testing, then we would say that their belief is knowledge because it used good intellectual practices. Makes sense? Well, I hope so. Another of the theories put forward, or the alternative theories of knowledge put forward, is it's a collection of theories really, but the pragmatic theories. So these theories suggest that knowledge is tied to practical success. If a belief helps you navigate the world effectively, it essentially counts as knowledge. So, as an example, you might believe that pressing the brake pedal in your car will stop the car. You don't need to know the physics of how the brakes work. You don't need to understand the engineering principles and so on. But since that belief works, practically and reliably, in your life, it can be, under this definition, be considered knowledge. And the final sort of alternative idea that I'm gonna get out there is externalism and internalism. So there's a debate over whether knowledge depends on factors outside of your awareness or control, which is externalism, or whether you need to have conscious access to your justification, which is internalism. So let me illustrate that with an example. Externalism might say that you don't need to understand how your brain works to know something. As long as your cognitive processes are working properly, you can have knowledge. Internalism, on the other hand, would require you to be aware of your reasons or evidence for believing something to count it as knowledge. So that's externalism and internalism. So to sum up this short video about knowledge and the Gettier problem and so on, knowledge has traditionally been understood as justified true belief. But so, as you'll remember, justified true belief is requires three conditions. You must believe the proposition must be true, and you must have good reasons or evidence to actually hold that belief in the first place. So, as I say, traditionally knowledge has been sort of understood as that justified true belief, i.e. meeting those three criteria. But challenges like the Gettier problem have led philosophers to explore other theories. Whether we think of knowledge as a reliable process, a virtuous process, or a practical tool, the question of what it means to know something is very much still alive. So one of the sort of responses to the Gettier problem is often like looking at each problem, like with a granular approach and looking at each problem individually. But the Gettier problem itself is formulaic. So the resolution to that problem has to be formulaic and sort of universal in the sense of like it answers the Gettier problem rather than individual problems that are described as Gettier problems, if that makes sense. Perhaps it doesn't, but essentially the solution to the Gettier problem has to solve the problem as a concept rather than the individual problems in your day-to-day life. I think that probably made a little more sense. But yes, so the question of what it means to know something, as I say, is still with us, and it might be that we never get to the bottom of this question, or we may do. We just don't know. But it's worth reflecting on these sort of different approaches and on your own sort of understanding and definition of knowledge, so that you can improve your own sort of knowledge and the use and execution of that knowledge. Doing that sort of introspective work, thinking about the theories of knowledge and so on, allows us to better understand the complexity of knowledge and, perhaps more importantly, how our beliefs connect us to the world we live in, right? So that is, in a nutshell, where philosophy currently stands on the concept of knowledge. So what I want what I would really like is, if you got to this point in the video, i.e. the end, I would really like you to jump in the comments and let me know what your theory of knowledge is, what you believe is the definition of knowledge. Because I think everybody has some version of a definition of knowledge within. And while I'm sure there's a lot of overlap between them, I'd imagine that everybody has a slight sort of variation, or their own unique perspective on what constitutes as knowledge. So if you can jump in the comments and share that would be wonderful. So that's it for today. It was just a quick one about the nature of knowledge and the Gettier problem and so on. And it is, as I have said already, it kind of forms the base of all philosophy. So it's an important question, and it's a much deeper and indeed more complicated problem than it appears on the surface. But that's all for today, because I don't want to ramble on forever. So thank you very much for listening, and I very much look forward to reading your comments about your perspective on what constitutes as knowledge.